Hello, hello, and welcome to Fall for Watercolor Challenge Day 9. Today we're going to be painting mushrooms, and I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about where watercolor will go on your page. So, one of the main things I hear folks talking about is watercolor's so intimidating because I just never know where it's going to go. So I'm going to need a little practice sheet of paper. We're going to talk about a concept that I call it water barrier. There might be a fancier name, but basically wherever you're painting, okay, I'm going to paint a circle. Wherever you're painting, that water is going to stay within that water barrier that you've created. So think of it like you're defining your own little kiddie pool here, okay? And the water is going to stick in there. So it's not going to bleed outside of that unless you have like so much water. When we're doing a wash, that's when you cover a certain area of watercolor paper with paint and water mixture. It's called a wash. You can make it a drier wash where it's almost completely dry and it'll dry really fast. You might make it a really juicy wash. Maybe you want to kind of play around with it for a while. Maybe you want to add more colors into it. Okay, we did that a little bit in our apple painting, adding colors to our wash, and it's all going to stay within this water barrier. All right. So we can actually blend colors in a couple different ways. That's what we're going to be talking about today with our mushrooms. So using this water barrier, when we add color into this, like how I just added that green, that's called the wet and wet technique. Okay, and we are going to use this technique to blend some colors in with our mushroom to kind of give it some mushroomy shape. All right, so let's just dig into it. I'm going to create my mushroom shape, and I think I'm going to do mine. Maybe red. Okay. And I'm just going to do, I don't know, something like this. Okay. We've got some red. I really like this color. I think it's super fun, but if you wanted to make it, maybe you were like, it's too bright. It's got too much pizzazz. Maybe we can add like a little bit of green in there just to kind of tone it down. And I just tapped the top of my paint dot, and here I'm just kind of dotting that color in. We're just kind of blending it into the paint. So in the previous videos, we've mixed almost all of our paint in here on our palette. But in this video, we're mixing it actually on the paper itself. So there we go. There's a little mushroom. All right, and before we draw our stem, we're going to wait because when we're thinking about water barriers, anything that touches this shape is going to bleed. So let's make another mushroom, and I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so if I make another little mushroom, maybe down here, okay? This one's kind of a funny little shape, but that's okay. All right. But if I am accidentally, I don't know if you can see, they're so close to touching. Let's zoom in a little bit here. Okay, they're so close to touching. If I touch these two pieces right here, they're going to start blending together. So that red is going to come into that green, or the green might go into the red, depending on how much water is in each one. Basically, sometimes the paint really likes to spill into other areas. Sometimes it has to do with how damp or how dry one of the areas is. But either way, once these two water barriers touch, we are wiggling and jiggling together, okay? So if you don't want that to happen, you're going to want to just wait a little bit in between. What am I trying to say? In between your layers, you're going to want to wait for it to dry. So here I'm going to do one of those like big floopy ones, and I want it to bleed. I'm like, give me the bleed. And so I've got a nice juicy outline here. I'm just filling it in quickly before that outline dries. There we go. And I'm going to wait a little bit for these to dry before I add my stem. Actually, I am going to add a stem to one of them just to show you kind of what I'm talking about. So if you're feeling very impatient and you're like, I gotta paint this right now. I cannot wait any longer for these mushrooms. So I'm mixing up a little brown color. And what you can do if you're like, I can't wait, you can do your stem and leave a little gap. Okay, we talked about this white space when we were painting the pumpkins and the gourds. Okay, so we've left a little gap here. But if you accidentally have it touch, whoops, oh no, I had a touch. That's okay. It's going to bleed a little bit and it's going to be really cute. And actually, I'm kind of loving this. So I'm just going to keep going. We will let it dry before I do something to that last mushroom though. So don't worry. I don't know. I just feel like I like it mixing. They're like little, I don't know, just kind of little blendy blends. I'm digging it. But you can choose your own adventure. If you're like, nary of the two shall twain, then, don't do it. Okay, so here, I do not want this one to blend in with this little mushroom guy too much. So I'm going around the mushroom for my stem. Okay, so I've gone mostly around the mushroom. I did have it bump into it a little bit. And this mushroom is actually kind of, you'll see, it's kind of like jaunty. So I am doing the stem like a little bit wet and wet in there. We'll see the vision. We'll see the vision. Should we do some grass? Why not? So I'm using my Perylene green, and then I've got a little bit of orange on here that I'm kind of adding in just to give it a little bit of that earthy texture. If you're interested in learning more about how to neutralize your color palette, like getting those bright colors from your palette to be a little bit more earth tony, let me know. I'd be happy to get into that. Oh, sorry. You couldn't really see my grass. Okay. Just want it to be a little scragglier, Looks like somebody was mowing the lawn out here by these mushrooms. No way. All right. So once this is dry, then we can add some more details. Okay. So I'm going to pause you for a sec and I'm going to get my blow dryer. Hang tight. All right. So I just want to take a moment to kind of draw your attention to what's happening here because there's some exciting things happening. Okay. So this is bleeding the green into the red. I don't know if you remember, but when it started, the red was actually bleeding into the green, but somehow in the drying process, the green has gone into the red. Okay, so that's a bleed. And this little like kind of woo, that's called a bloom. So it's like the paint is blooming into the other shape. It's not like mixing hard. So here's a better example of a bloom. Do you see, I don't know if you can see, let's get even closer if we can. I don't know if you can tell, but there's kind of like a crispy line here. And so what happened with this, that's a bloom. And that is when the paint from this section was still wet and this paint from this section dried. So as the paint was drying, it kind of met at this point. And the dry part stopped our water barrier from expanding and mixing and created this little crispy line. So this may happen and you're like, oh, I don't like how it looks. But honestly, I think it's so much fun. It's one of those things that's like very uniquely watercolor. So, lean into it. Okay, same thing here. We've got another little fun bleed. We've got a fun bleed. We've got another bloom down here. Got some nice wet and wet happening. And then I'm not sure if you can tell, but do you see how you can see the line of the mushroom down here? Okay, so what happened here was this part, the stem, was already dry. And then I added a second layer of the grass over it. And when you add a layer of paint over something that's already dried, it's called a glaze. We're using a lot of technical terms right now. I don't want you to stress about it, but I'm just showing you different things that watercolor can do. So we've got a lot of cool wet and wet action. That's when the paint is wet and it's all mixing around and you're having fun. Now I'm going to show you what can happen when we add a layer of paint over dried watercolor paint. Okay, so I wanted to kind of give this mushroom here a little like sense that it's coming from, like we're kind of looking at it from underneath. So here I'm just making that shape of that underneath mushroom part with a nice light brown. I don't want it to be like too dark here, okay? I want it to be, I don't know, like a little bit darker, but I do want to see the color underneath. And I've left some room for the stem so we can see that stem. See, it looks like it has a little shadow. And then I might do a second layer here on my mushroom stems too, just to kind of differentiate the stem from the part above, the cap. We're covering a lot of terms here, y'all. I couldn't stop myself, couldn't resist. But I don't want you to feel stressed if you like don't remember the terms. It's a great way to kind of notice what's happening on your paper. And do you like it? Do you not like it? Does it surprise you? Does it delight you? Does it make you mad? I don't know. Notice how you're feeling when your water goes all over the place. I feel like I just need a little something, something. So I might do, what do I want to do here? I might do some like, I don't know, some little wiggly spots. Just feel like it needs just a little something more. Is that weird? Sure, but it's kind of cute, isn't it? All right, so if we wanted to do the gills for the mushroom under here, we would want to wait for this to dry first so that then we could have some nice distinct gills. If we tried to do it right now, it would just kind of bleed all over the place because it's still a wet water barrier. Another thing I might do is just add a second layer to this mushroom. So I love the shadow that's happening, so I really don't want to cover it up too much, but I do want to have like a little bit of a distinction between the shapes here. And by adding just the slightest little layer of paint, I'm going to get a little bit of that differentiation between our mushrooms. Like I love, love, love that you can see the bleed underneath this layer. But I think it's just going to make it pop a little bit more if it's a little bit more distinct. All right. I feel pretty happy with this. I feel like I could paint mushrooms all day long. This is such a fun one. I added some kind of, some shadow, some perspective. We can add that if we want. Maybe a little shadow, like it's a little darker under here. But you don't have to, okay? This is still wet, so I'm able to kind of do that wet and wet action. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to fuss with it too much more. I think it's pretty cute, and I'm going to leave it there. So as you're painting, I invite you to look at your painting. Sometimes with watercolor, things get surprising. Things get all over the place. But instead of being like, it didn't turn out how I wanted it to turn out, I invite you to say, look at that. And maybe wonder about how it happened or think about how you might use that in a different context. Or either way, I just want you to be gentle with yourself, okay? Because watercolor, it can feel frustrating sometimes, but I want you to lean into the fun and playful part of it. All right, try. Okay. Happy painting, friends. If you haven't signed up for the challenge yet, please check out the link in my bio. If you haven't liked and subscribed, what the heck are you doing? Join me here on YouTube. And happy painting. All right. Oop. And